you're not weak. You're not, you're not in a deficit in some way because you're feeling this way. You're grieving, you're in pain, you're suffering. And it's in that moment where you have to give yourself a little bit of comfort and not allow yourself to believe that you're a bad person. Because I think a lot of times with suicide, we get that toxic shame of, I can't believe that I was going to do that. I'm such an awful person. Why would anybody want to be around me because I think these type of things and I've tried these type of things before. We're all human. We all have the same emotions.
Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. This is your host, author, coach, and healer, Andy Grant. Visit theandygrant.com to learn more about me. Real Men Feel reminds men that they are human beings and they have the right to express and experience all of their emotions. We have conversations that most men are not having, but that all men and the women who love them can benefit from. My guest today is Jennifer Ginty. Jen is a single mom and entrepreneur who lives with complex PTSD and major depressive disorder from childhood trauma. Throughout her life, Jen has learned valuable coping skills and has made it her mission to help others to better understand their own emotions. She has spent the last 5 years developing My Moody Monster, a pull-apart plush toy that has helped children to get out their frustrations in a safe way and giving families a tool to talk about emotions and communication. Jen is also the host of the mental health podcast, When Not Yet Becomes Right Now. Jen and I are both suicide attempt survivors and know what life feels like at the bottom. We also know that every bottom eventually turns around. Today we discuss some common myths around suicide, things to include in your own coping toolbox, and explore some thoughts and beliefs we held at our lowest points and ways to get through them. If you are in crisis, do not hesitate to get help. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. The suicide crisis line in the US and Canada is 988, and people are there 24 hours a day. Let's do it. Hello, Jen, and welcome to Real Men Feel.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this talk. I was recently on your podcast, which is called When Not Yet Becomes Right Now, and I was talking about being suicidal from a young age and all my attempts before I finally got that maybe I'm supposed to be here, which is the point of all those stories. But we found there was a lot of similarities, right?
Yeah, there is.
So we're both in Massachusetts, but we both grew up here, so we ended up in the same mental hospital, even at very different times. But anyway, there was a great response to that in our conversation and openness, so I wanted you to come on here and talk about that. And when I reached out to you, the title that was in my head was Being Suicidal Doesn't Mean You're Crazy. And I believe that one of the best ways to prevent suicide is to talk about it.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to talk about it. And we might laugh about it. And to me, we're not making light if you feel when you're like, I know it is not funny when you're in it. But I also know I did a lot of like goofy, dumb things that I can laugh at now. And to me, that shows healing and growth. But if you're not there, don't listen to this, right? Call or text 988. That's the Suicide Crisis Lifeline in the U.S. and just get help. Don't torture yourself by listening to our tales that we have survived and overcome. Even though I will make light of myself, I do not make light of anyone feeling like they are better off dead. It's a horrible place to be. So again, if that's who we are, don't listen.
Yeah. It's that sounds about right.
Back in October 2019, I did a Real Men Feel with Dr. Lulu, who was a pediatrician who focused on teens, and she was on to talk about suicide risk factors. And she was the first person to say, we don't need to have a mental illness to be suicidal. And I was like, what? Especially coming from a doctor? I had never heard that. So I growing up, I thought so few people talked openly about suicide that the only place people did for me was in a mental hospital, which made it seem just more crazier than ever. So when I say that you don't need to have mental illness to be suicidal, how does that land for you?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. There are times in people's lives that they're low. They're very low, and they may not have depression. They may not have a mental illness like bipolar or PTSD or something like that, but it doesn't mean that they don't have the feeling, that they don't want to wake up the next day.
Yeah. I often say that the thought, the feeling, isn't, I don't want to say it's not dangerous. It's certainly, it's not uncommon. And to me, when it crosses the danger line is when someone's in the stages of planning and they have means to harm
Mm.
themselves. That's when, all right, now, now we really take action, get help.
Right, like active suicidality. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There you go. You have your terminology down. Is there anything you know now that you wished your younger self knew when it comes to feeling this
Woo!
way?
That's a question. Yeah, absolutely. I think I, as an adult, would tell younger Jen, little Jen, that this too shall pass, that it feels so extraordinarily catastrophic right now in this moment. But there's so much more ahead, and things can change, and you can make change in your life.
Yeah, that's a good one. I used to be afraid of responsibility because I thought it meant blame. But that, yeah, you can change your life at any age. Like we do have a level of empowerment. It's Frankel's book, The Men in Meaning, right? That we always have control of our brain and what we focus on. And sometimes there can be challenges to keep that focus, but we can decide to look at this thing, or decide to see this point of view, or decide to find something good in this what could be a horrible moment.
Yeah. It's really hard in the moment, I would say. And I think it's years and years of going through it constantly where I do see the other side of it. And also, I think it comes with being a mother, is that I really wasn't allowed to stay in that particular place because I had two children that I had to take care of, and one that also had a suicidal ideation and an attempt. So, I feel as though being a mother wasn't giving me the time to sit and stew in it.
Mm. So the responsibility for other lives
Mhm.
gave your life some push, some meaning, perhaps? Is that?
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in
Yeah,
your mouth.
and I wanted to break generational trauma. I did not want my children to go through what I went through. I did not want them to feel the way I felt when I was a child with my abuser.
Did feeling that badly when you were younger, did that give you any concerns about having
Oh,
children?
yes. Yeah. I think it was up until I was married for a few years that I didn't want to have children. And my husband was okay with that. And there was a switch with me. And I think it was when my friends started having children and I was holding their little beings in my arms. And I was like, I want one of these. Maybe this would be cool.
So overall, was it cool?
It was hard. It was really hard because I grew up with an abuser. I did not learn how to parent, really. I didn't have that person teaching me the proper way to parent a child. So in the beginning, it was really, really difficult. And at times I was really triggered because my oldest, he showed signs of, behavioral issues, particularly being very destructive at a very, very young age. And there were times where I felt that my child was abusing me. I was getting triggered.
Is there anything you believe now that you didn't then?
Hmm. I would say I had to go through it to learn how to work with my own feelings. And the other thing is that I really do wish that I had started my healing journey much, much sooner. But as you know, with the title of my show, When Not Yet Becomes Right Now, I pushed it off for so long. And I had myself believing that I had to in order to take care of the little beings in my life.
Oh, so that sense of responsibility then it kept you going, but it didn't get you into taking better care of
No,
yourself.
nope. Yeah. I mean, that is the one thing that I tell parents constantly is it's okay to start that journey. You're going to come out better for it, and your children are going to come out better for it as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's never a wrong time to start healing yourself.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Um, is there anything that stands out that you believed, like in your teen years, that you realized as an adult wasn't true?
Yeah. even though I wanted my abuser out of my life, I felt as though I was being, left behind in a sense. I was so happy when my father, who was my abuser, was taken from our home. But, there's also that feeling of what did I do wrong in it? How did I make this happen? Because I think a lot of children feel that way when it comes to a parent who is an abuser. What did I do to get this? And is this going to be the rest of my life? Are people always going to treat me the way my abuser did?
Those are all deep, heavy thoughts that can really take someone down the hole. When you were having those thoughts, when you were younger, did you keep it all to yourself, or was this someone you shared this
Oh,
with?
all to myself. Yeah, I didn't trust a soul. The trust issues were real with me. I didn't trust anyone in my life. I kept it all to myself. And it wasn't me who came out with the abuse. My older brother told a trusted adult, and that is when everything came out in our family.
So I told you I had like a. It's weird. We're doing a weird
Okay,
show. This is
yeah,
just gonna be
let's do
weird.
it.
I asked ChatGPT for some common suicide myths.
Okay.
And I thought, and I haven't looked at it. I cut and pasted it. I haven't read them either. So we'll both hear them for the first time, and we'll just have our honest reaction to those.
Yeah.
But before I get to the list, and maybe it's on there, one thing that's always bothered me, suicide is often referred to as the easy way out.
Mm.
Did you ever find it easy to make attempts on your life?
Never. No. I may have thought this was the right way to get out of how I felt. But at my age, I didn't think past me because that's what a teenager does, right? They're only thinking of themselves. Like I was thinking, what's the best way for me to get out of this? What's the fastest? What's the, thing that's going to make me feel better? And I didn't have that idea yet that other people wanted me around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was on your show. I talked about this. That one of the lies I told myself to make attempts easier was that everybody I loved would be better off without me.
Yeah.
Like if I was gone, nobody would be concerned about how bad am I going to get, and is he in trouble, and all those things. And I thought, to me, I had no sense of religion or afterlife. I thought dying was just like I moved.
Mm.
Oh, I don't see that guy anymore. He moved away. That was the end
Yeah.
of it. And I thought people would get over it. Sure, they'll be upset for a weekend, and then life as usual kicks in pretty quick.
Well, I mean, to me, that sounds like you didn't have, you didn't see that your life was, of importance to others.
Yeah, right, correct, yeah. And even if it wasn't important to me, when anyone else thought about it, really didn't matter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so let's dig into them common myths. And again, neither of us have seen these. Number one, people who talk about suicide are just seeking attention.
Ugh. What a gross, that's gross. That gives me a yucky feeling.
People that talk about suicide, in your experience or seeing others, like, what are they after?
Finality. An end to pain, to suffering.
Yeah. There's so many better ways, healthier ways, or destructive ways to get attention, but
I think, and I again, trigger warning, I think a lot of people who are just outside that suicidal ideation, they do things like cutting, things like that are more of not a cry for attention, a cry for help.
Yeah, I call, in my book Still Here, I talk about it like every attempt, it's a cry for love, right? That's why every human is longing for love.
Yeah.
And I believe suicidal people are, the first person not to love them is themselves.
Yeah.
So if you can't have love for yourself, you can't have love for someone else, and you can't receive someone else's love. Right? If we don't have it, we don't know what it is. You can't trade in that if you already have some. Right? Myth number 2, suicides happen without warning.
I mean, there are times where I have felt that flick of, oh, why can't this just end? Or, we've talked about this on when we were on my show, is that driving on down the road and that feeling of I could just turn the wheel and hit the ramp or whatever and flip over and be done. So I don't think that it's something that you work up to. There are times where you can be just anywhere and be like, gee, I freaking don't want to be doing this.
Yeah, and this feels a little overlap to the first myth, but this again, seeking a tape. You mentioned cutting, so there were self-destructive actions that are cries for help, cries for love,
Yes.
that are warning signs that someone is at risk for sure. But yeah, I've never met anybody that just like had a fine, outstanding life one day. You know what? I think dying would be the best thing to do. Like there's maybe you don't see the warning signs, but certainly in hindsight, they always seem to be there.
Right.
Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I agree. I think there's different ways of looking at suicidality, and I think there are different methods that show up in our brains. We could be for weeks thinking on it, and again, maybe being an active suicidality. But there are those times where like I said, I'm driving on the road and something just clicks. I get triggered. My PTSD symptoms may be crazy, and in that moment was like, yeah, I really just wish I could just do it. I just want to do it.
Yeah, I think and I certainly can't remember every time I've had a thought, but the one I can laugh at and point out was just, man, that was just silly. It was like I was 18, 19 years old, going to some shitty job in between high school and college when I finally went, and I got a flat tire on the way this way, and I was just like, I'm just gonna jump in traffic instead of changing the tire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what is? And it made sense, seemed logical in the moment. But again, life is on our sides. A friend on the way to work pulls over behind me and changes my tire. Well, I'm just there like, nah, freaking out, and like I'm like, didn't realize for months until I realized, oh, again, there was the evidence that everything works out and things are going in my favor, but I didn't realize in the moment.
Yeah, and I think there's that overwhelm that people who have suicidal ideation it's when that feeling of I just can't do this anymore, and something like changing a tire is that overwhelm. It's like, this is the last straw. I just can't do this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because for me there's no real final straw. Like, well, there is, but that's not the reason.
Right.
Yeah. So even if I'm like, Jen, I hate your guts, blah, and I die that day, it didn't have anything to do with that. Right. It was all this underlying, long percolating abuse to myself that leads to such a destructive act. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the third most common myth regarding suicide: if someone wants to die, nothing can stop them.
Oh, that's not true at all.
Yeah.
It could be a physical response. It could be a call from a friend in that moment. Just because you have suicidal thoughts doesn't mean that they can't be pushed off or stopped immediately in some way. And I think that's why it's so important to remember the 988 hotline, is that there is somewhere that you can turn. It doesn't have to be the final moment.
Growing up and being in it, I thought, oh, I want to die, I wish I was dead. Now, looking back, I realize I believed I wanted to die. And to me, there's a big difference. That puts that buffer. Like, almost anything can stop them, right? Asking, how are you doing? I know Kevin Hines. He's a great suicide speaker and activist, and he's one of the few people to survive a jump from the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yikes! Wow.
And he was walking the bridge, saying, and again, it's not the easy way out. All of life force, all of everything about us and in every cell in our body is like, live, right? So he's walking. He's suicidal. He's walking the Golden Gate Bridge and says, I won't do it if just one person smiles at me. And nobody made eye contact with him. He said the only people that talked to him were some tourists that asked him to take a picture. They didn't even thank him. They just took the camera and then no eye contact. So he was like, all right, well, then goodbye.
Yeah.
So, and to prevent the death of someone, it doesn't really take a lot either. Like, be present. How are you, really? And sit down and listen.
Yeah.
There's so rarely an action you need to take.
You know what's really interesting is that, I've had a few things going on in my life that have been very overwhelming. And at some point in my life, probably would have pushed me into that, active suicidal thought process. Today, I randomly got a card from my best friend who moved away. And it was just so beautiful. She's just like, I'm thinking of you. I love you. I miss being around you. Just one thing like that can change a person's idea of what their life looks like outside of the pain that they're feeling.
That reminds me of something. So I have something it's a special dedicated journal. It's called Evidence of My Magnificence.
Yes.
And it's clippings, it's quotes, it's impacts I've made, and I never look at it except when I'm like, oh no, I have no impact. I'm doing nothing positive. My life is meaningless. Oh wait, what's all this evidence? And so I recommend that, share that, and with a tool like that, I can prevent my own thinking I want to die.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as we confront ourselves with evidence that we matter, we have meaning, we're loved, we're lovable, all these things that, in our worst times, that critic, that inner just harpy, that's just like, you suck, you can't do anything right, you're overwhelmed by everything. Everything in the world seems like the final straw. So that there are ways, reach out to tools you've made for yourself or reach out to friends. There's another practice I have from a positive psychology program I did, and it's called a happiness jar. And each day, anytime something, you can do it daily if you're dedicated enough, or just like, oh man, I got a nice card for my way. You just write this little note, throw it in the jar. And on your birthday or on New Year's Eve, you dump it all out and you read all these happy things from the previous year.
Oh, I love that. That's a great thing.
It can be a great family tradition. It just can help you. And you can break glass in case of mercy. You don't have to wait a year. Like, oh, it really sucks. Larry, what's this? Cheer me up jar. Challenge it and read those things and see how you are. But
yeah, I always tell people that they need to build a toolbox for themselves, a coping skills toolbox. And I believe there should be a space in that toolbox for people who have had suicidal ideation throughout their lives, that there is that one thing that can bring you back from the brink. That sounds like a good one.
Yeah, there are a couple. I took a year-long program in positive psychology, and again, I share a bunch of them and still here. But yeah, the happiness jar is something I actually put to use. The Journal of My Magnificence, the Evidence of My Magnificence, I think that was a self-created thing. It came from a meditation, the idea. I don't remember, but that's something I tell clients to do often who don't, they can be, most people are high achieving compared to their own opinion of themselves. So again, you just need that proof, that evidence. So let's see. Myth number 4. Oh, we've already hit this one. So only people with mental illness attempt suicide.
Nope.
And again, that was the whole genesis of our conversation. And certainly mental illness is a risk factor. But again, in signs of overwhelm, stress, feeling of hopelessness, helplessness, that thought of suicide, it can be the most logical thing in the moment.
Yeah. It's the, again, I believe is the way out of the grief, the agony that we're feeling in the moment.
And while that thought is not abnormal, we really need to realize we have the power to choose a better thought, right? Because again, I invite everyone that's ever felt this way. I believe I want to die, as opposed to I want to die, and just put that little buffer that maybe it is just a thought. One of my favorite teachers, Louise Hay. It's just a thought, and a thought can be changed.
Yeah.
And I used to journal that sentence over and over when I was really, I can't. This is more than a thought. It's real. And that isn't.
That's why I use the this too shall pass.
Myth number 5. This is good too. Talking about suicide will plant the idea in someone's head.
That's ridiculous. That is probably the most egregious one I've heard yet.
That's like strengthening the shame and the wrongness about having this thought. And it isn't. It's just a thought.
Yep. That is toxic shame right there. Yikes.
Yeah. But when I was growing up, it did seem, again, people didn't talk about it, and they thought, because that's if someone, if a teen, especially in a community, attempts suicide, there can be a string of them.
Mm.
So they think this copycat behavior is due to, oh, they never, like I said, no one's struck by lightning with the idea of, yeah, dying, that's the answer.
This is not
But
Heather's.
yeah, right. Anytime someone dies by their own hand, it becomes the news, people hear about it. It does give every pained soul like, oh, I've had that thought again. Maybe, so it might be someone's quote unquote final straw, but it's not the reason. It's not like, that seems like a great thing to do. It's not like the latest fad on TikTok dance or something. It just doesn't work that way.
And that myth in particular is so disgusting to me, because what do you need to do when you feel suicidal? You need to talk to someone about it. And if you feel as though you can't because, oh my God, I'm creating a suicide wave, with others, that's a surefire way to make people feel even more suicidal.
Yeah. And aside from our list here, have you ever personally had an experience calling a suicide prevention hotline or text line or anything like that?
No, my mother always required me to be in therapy. Even like going off to college, she was like, I won't help you unless you're in therapy. Which, at the time I thought was really crazy, like, gee, thanks, Mom. But I always did have that support. I had that person that I could reach out to when I was having those feelings. So I did utilize my therapists in that way.
So at one point in my life, I did call the hotline, and it wasn't just because I could talk about it. It was like I was at a low point. It's a time I was standing on a building, trying to give up the nerve, and I, in hindsight, what I wanted was some aha moment again. And instead, I called the hotline. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I don't want to do this, but here I am. And again, it's just a safe place to say anything.
Yeah.
It's not recorded. It's not held against you. Don't even. They might have asked my first name to just have a conversation, but that's it. So because I've heard from other people when I ask this question, and they've had bad experiences, and so if someone's like, just hang up, call again, get a different person. But,
I've only heard positives about people who have reached out. Yeah, friends that I've known. I had a woman on my show, Haj, who she was in Ireland at the time, and she was so suicidal. And it was one thing that a coworker had said to her that made her call the hotline, and it changed her life. She was on the very brink of it in that moment, and it saved her.
Next, myth number 6. Once someone attempts suicide, they'll always be suicidal.
Nope. Not a thing. Not real, not a thing.
And it just says, many attempt survivors go on to live fulfilling lives, especially with the right support and resources. So one thing I tell people, if you've ever seriously contemplated suicide, that option will always be there. All right? But it doesn't mean you're always suicidal.
Right.
Again, it just means, there can be. And it's my default thought pattern, just because it's the oldest one. It is literally the deepest rut in my brain. And so that's why it takes effort to get out of that rut and choose a different thought. Yeah. But do that enough, and my rut gets, it's not as sharp. It's getting filled in. It's, it's it's barely there.
I look back at the times where I was at my worst and close to, attempts or an attempt. And I am so glad that I was able to pull myself out, because I'm living a life that I love now. And, maybe later down the road, I'm in therapy on my healing journey, and I'm working through past trauma. I may one day feel that way again. I may feel suicidal again, but I know now, as a 50-year-old woman, that I can get past it and live a beautiful life.
So the 7th myth, suicide is a selfish or cowardly act.
So I hear that one a lot. And I don't think that it's necessarily true at all. And I think that's because when we're in so much pain, we can't see outside of that pain, outside of the grief that we're feeling. And in that moment, we're not thinking, I'm doing this for me. Like you said, you've said it before, people won't miss me. I'll do this and, people will be better for it. When you're in such a deep depression or in so much pain, you're not thinking of what the other side of things, what's going to happen for everyone else in your life.
In the mind, well, in the mind of this suicidal
Mhm.
person, suicide was a more of a selfless act. Like I thought, I'm the problem in so many people's lives. I'll eliminate this
Yeah.
problem, and thereby I'm helping the world.
Mhm.
Yeah, I felt like a burden. I knew people were worried about me, and I thought, well, like, and I'm wasting all my time and energy on my demise. This must be distracting other people from living their best lives.
I've,
So yeah,
I've
there's
thought of,
so much distorted
oh, yeah,
thinking.
I've thought many times that my children would be better off without me. And I know for a fact that's not true. I mean, that my children would, I can't even get in how horrible that would be for them. But there have been times where I'm like, well, maybe they'll be better off without me. Then they can, do the things in the world that they want to do, and I'm not holding them back.
All right, myth number 8. Only certain types of people die by suicide.
That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, like that's the first myth I don't even know what that means. I have not heard
I have
that.
no idea what that means. Only certain
Yeah.
type of people. So I think that goes back to the mental health side of things. You can only have a mental illness if you're suicidal. You have to have
Mm,
a mental health issue if you're suicidal. And I think that's what that kind of like reads to.
okay. Yeah. Is there any? I'm trying to think of just over the course of my life, or even in pop culture or something. Is there? I guess maybe like the notion of hysteria and women. So
Mm.
is it like only women right? Isn't it women make more attempts, but men die by suicide more often?
Ooh,
So I don't know if that's
I don't know.
part
I
of that.
don't know. I've always heard
Mm,
the different ways that genders choose to, be suicidal. Like women take pills. They do things that don't hurt the body, like, and men choose things like guns, stuff like that. Whereas women
yeah,
choose
yeah.
something that's not violent.
So that's the end of the
Oh,
myths.
good.
So yeah,
those were
so we
those were sucky
and one didn't
myths.
even make anything. All right. So is there a myth around suicide or mental illness based on your lived experience that you see and want to dispel?
Hmm. There's no age to suicide, ideation. And my son, when he was very little, he had suicidal thoughts, and it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. So it doesn't matter if you're 5 or 50. It doesn't matter what age you are, where you will feel, that you're so grieving and so in pain.
Yeah, and even though a suicide attempt is a risk factor for more, even though I said once you contemplate suicide, it'll always be an option, it does get easier. It does get better the more you allow yourself to heal and again step back and witness and realize, oh, they were just thoughts. They were because we talked about this on your show. Like I have 2 generations of death by suicide in my
Yeah.
family. So as a kid especially, I thought I have these thoughts because I'm supposed to act on them. They return because I'm supposed to do something about it. And true in a sense, but following those thoughts wasn't what I was supposed to do.
Right. And that comes down to that generational trauma thing again. It
Mhm.
exists, it's real. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how better, but your example of understanding what generational trauma is. It's a perfect example.
Tell me a bit about My Moody
Oh,
Monster.
yeah. Okay. So, Moody is a true healing journey for me. It's like a love letter to my healing journey. Uh, I had to claim bankruptcy and close a boutique that I owned in town, and I felt like I lost my identity. I was at an extreme low point. My brain was not working. My body was feeling tired all the time. I wasn't communicating well with people, and I was suicidal. And I knew that it was time for me to get my team together. So I created my team. I had my individual therapist. And then I also went into McLean Hospital. I went inpatient because I knew that I needed to work through things with safety around me. And I thought that was the most important part for me. Well, now I was in group therapy there. I had been so frustrated with my PTSD symptoms that I said, I wish I had a monster that I could rip apart, throw across the room, burn, drown, that kind of thing. And people were like, you should have that. And I was like, okay, well, let's see, what can I do with that? And I went home, and after, being inpatient, I went home and I thought, how do I do this? I'm not a seamstress. I'm not a tailor in any way, but I put together this ragtag plush doll, and I made their arms, legs, and head of Velcro. And I named this first monster PTSD Pete. He was my own little buddy that I could use to get through these like frustrations and symptoms and the things that were really bothering me. And after a while of using Pete, I realized this could be helpful to other people as well, and particularly children, because I always used to call my kids little cavemen when they were very little, because they were born with all these emotions and these primal things, and they had no idea how to get through them and had to be taught. And so I went to the SBA and I talked to them, and they were like, you should go to this place called, it's a nonprofit called E4All, and join their accelerator program. And this was right during COVID. COVID just hit. So I was able to spend all this time working through Moody and creating what I wanted to bring out into the world. And so Moody was born, and I started testing them with families and therapists and teachers to see how they would work for kids when they were having these big frustrations. And it really, it warmed my heart so much. I was just so happy because I heard that the communication between parents and kids and adults in general with kids was really important for this. And the great thing was ripping these dolls apart when you're really frustrated. But the best part about it was putting them back together again. Because you're putting back together, for adults, it's like putting back a piece of yourself, right? And thinking through, well, what happened and what can I do to help myself through this? And for kids, it's like teaching them, this happens. All emotions are valid. It's just how we react to them and how we cope with them. So that is really how Moody was born. And they're taken off into the world. And I'm so happy, it's been great for autistic kids. I just started working with an ABA center, and I gave them 3 dolls, and they were like, we need 3 more, like a week later. So I'm seeing that these are helping others to communicate with their children, especially parents like me who were not taught how to feel our emotions, especially not to show them.
Very cool. Yeah. I've seen Moody in person, and I was all like, wow, is he made for children or adults? And so
it's both. It's from 0 to 100 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, right.
I have friends Very and cool. I have even my trademark lawyer. She has one, and she's like, I use it during Zoom meetings all the time. Just under underneath the camera.
And tell me about your podcast.
Yes. So I had, New England Podcasters was probably the main reason why I did start my podcast, is because I'd gone on so many mental health podcasts and parenting podcasts. And I was telling that story of the not yet to right now moment where I just kept pushing off this healing journey until, like I said, the whole thing happened with the bankruptcy and my identity thing. And as I was telling this over time, I realized there are so many other people out there with these journeys. And they have had those moments where they've pushed off a healing journey, a life journey, some kind of journey that they needed to get on. And so what was holding them back is the big question that I like to ask. What is holding you back from that moment? And what was that right now that said, I got to do this? It's time. So, yeah, I have had so many incredible guests on, including Andy. And it's phenomenal. The people that I meet and the stories that I'm able to share with others have just been awesome.
Has there been a surprising lesson or like a most impactful guest from your own show on you in your life?
Hmm. There's so many good stories. There's this woman, Michelle Hollingsbrooks, that when she was a teenager, she got this awful virus that sent her into coma. And when she came out, she had no feeling. She couldn't move her body. She couldn't hear. She couldn't see. And she was laying in a bed in a hospital and had to learn how to sense people around her and what they were going to do to her at the time. She was learning with her senses how to handle life outside when she couldn't move, hear, see, speak, nothing. And it's such an incredible story that I so moved every time I even think of Michelle.
That's very
She's
nice.
incredible.
And Jen, before you wrap this up totally, back to the original topic, is there any technique, advice, any last thing you want to share for someone when they think they want to die?
Yeah, yeah. Like I've said, this too shall pass. But also, you have to give yourself grace in these moments. You're not weak. You're not in a deficit in some way because you're feeling this way. You're grieving, you're in pain, you're suffering. And it's in that moment where you have to give yourself a little bit of comfort and not allow yourself to believe that you're a bad person. Because I think a lot of times with suicide, we get that toxic shame of, I can't believe that I was going to do that. I'm such an awful person. Why would anybody want to be around me because I think these type of things and I have tried these type of things before. We're all human. We all have the same emotions. And the more we talk about them and talk about our own stories, we can help others as well. And I think there's that kind of, I don't know how you say it, by passing stories and talking to people about your feelings. It gives others the feeling that they can also speak their truth.
Jen, what's the best way for people to find out all you? Because you're up to a lot. Is there a single best source to find out everything you're up to?
Well, I mean, LinkedIn is a great way too. So under Jennifer Ginty, but also you can go on my website. I have two websites. I mean, I have My Moody Monster if you want to check out Moody. Not only can you order a Moody for yourself, I also have a donation page to donate a Moody if you don't need one for yourself or someone because I'm giving these donations to first responders and social workers and treatment centers to help kids in trauma. So there's that. And yeah, always reach out to me. It's Jen at mymoodymonster.com or Jen at notyettowritenow.com. I'm always so happy to talk to people about my experience and how I can help them.
Yeah, and would that be the closing notion that there's always someone you can reach out to,
Yeah.
be it 988, be it a podcast you heard, be it a book, a resource, or your evidence of your magnificence, clergy, best friend. There's really no end.
There really isn't. And again, if you are feeling that way, please reach out to me. I'm always available to talk to them about my own experiences and how I've learned to cope through those painful moments.
So again, thanks, Jen, for sharing, for being so open. And hopefully hopefully the myths resonated with you as opposed to some of the bad times we talked about and shared.
Yeah, those myths are terrible.
Yeah. So yeah, be willing to be your own mythbuster.
Yes.
And yeah, know that I firmly believe, and I surely didn't as a kid, That life is meant to be magnificent. We are all worthy of that. Nobody is broken. And there is always hope.
Yes, always hope.
All right, thanks for everyone for joining us. Please visit realmenfeel.org. We'll have a blog post for this episode. We'll have all of your links and resources that we discussed. Wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, please subscribe, follow, like, share this episode with somebody, post a review or a comment. And if you're not yet in the Real Men Feel Facebook group, maybe you didn't even know it existed, but you can visit realmenfeel.org/group to have deeper conversations, share tips and secrets into upcoming shows and past shows and all sorts of good things there. You can always reach out to me at realmenfeel@gmail.com. And until next time, be good to yourself.
Yeah.